Countless lies are being told about ICE's operations to deport illegals across the country, but it's important to remember, how did we actually get here? After all, President Trump was elected to office with the popular vote on the promise of mass deportations. But why are these actually necessary? Well, first comes the practical reasons. For example, 90% of all fentanyl in the United States comes from across the southern border, and that's with tens of thousands of pounds being seized at the border every single year. During the Biden administration alone, nearly 250,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. And there's other drugs too, by the way. For example, 80% of all heroin comes from across the southern border. Beyond that, multiple studies reflect that illegals actually commit crimes at a higher rate than U.S. citizens. For example, one study in Arizona found that illegals from 1985 to 2017 were nearly 2.5 times more likely to commit a crime than natural-born U.S. citizens. And real clear investigations have found that illegals have cost the country $166.5 billion in crimes alone, with tens of thousands of assaults, over 13,000 murders, hundreds of thousands of drug offenses, and many other crimes. Other liberal studies claim that illegals commit crimes at a lower rate than U.S. citizens, but countless other groups have counteracted and said that these numbers are vastly underestimated, especially when considering many of the liberal studies don't include misdemeanors or pending criminal charges. And it's blatantly false when you take into account that every single illegal has entered the country illegally and therefore is a criminal. Plus, crime rate statistics are generally irrelevant when considering that none of these crimes would have ever been committed if the illegals weren't allowed here in the first place or had already been deported. Probably most famous among these is Laken Riley, the young 22-year-old college student on the University of Georgia campus who was brutally murdered while out on a run one night by a member of the gang Tren de Aragua. Again, another crime that never would have been committed if illegals weren't allowed into the country in the first place. And these are just the criminal aspects. The economic aspects are staggering, and we'll cover more of those next week.